The night was warm, the stadiums were ancient, and football was about to be reborn. 52 matches, 16 nations, one summer that didn't just change the game, it transformed it forever. This is Italia 90, the tournament that saved football. To understand why Italia 90 mattered so profoundly, you have to understand the world football was coming from. The 1980s were a dark chapter for the beautiful game. Attendances in England were falling, stadiums, many of them Victorian relics, were crumbling, the terraces were caged, fans were treated not as paying customers, but as problems to be managed. Violence stalked the game, hooliganism had become football's defining image, not goals, not glory, but riots, arrests, tear gas. English clubs had been banned from European competition since 1985, a 5-year exile, a punishment for the sins of the terraces. The government was watching. Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher had little sympathy for football or its culture. There was serious talk, not fringe talk, serious talk of identity card schemes, of corralling supporters, of treating an entire sport as a public order problem. Across Europe, the picture was not much brighter. Racism was endemic. Ultraculture, in Italy especially, had a sinister edge. Football was entertaining millions, but it was simultaneously repelling them. The 1989 season alone had shaken English football to its foundations. Reform was not optional, it was urgent. Something had to change. Football needed a redemption story. It needed a stage. Italy, June 8, 1990, the defending champions, the reigning world champions, beaten in their opening game by Cameroon on the grandest stage in football. Argentina, the team of Diego Maradona, humbled by a nation ranked 24th in the world, a nation most neutrals had never seen play. That result sent a signal around the world. This tournament would be different. Italy had not come to Italia 90 simply to host. The Azzurri arrived with pressure that would have crushed lesser squads. Every match played on home soil. Every defeat was unthinkable. The nation demanded glory, and from the most unlikely of sources, they almost got it. Salvatore Schillaci, a Sicilian striker who had spent most of his career in Serie B. Not a household name, not a superstar, but at Italia 90, he became something else entirely. 6 goals in 6 appearances, the golden boot, the golden ball, the tournament's player and its top scorer. A man who arrived as a footnote and left as a legend. His eyes, wide, wild, burning with intensity, became the visual symbol of the whole tournament. When Schillaci scored, he didn't just celebrate, he ignited. But if Schillaci was the tournament's heart, Diego Maradona was its soul and its most dangerous fault line. 4 years after the hand of God, 4 years after his solo masterpiece against England in Mexico, Maradona arrived in Italy as the most famous footballer on the planet and as something more complicated than a hero. He played for Napoli. He had spent 5 years there. He had won them their only 2 Serie A titles. He was not just a player to the city of Naples, he was a deity. Now the World Cup had delivered him a semi-final in Naples against Italy. What followed was one of the most extraordinary moments in tournament history. Maradona, publicly, provocatively, appealed to the Neapolitan people. He reminded them that the North had never truly accepted the South, that Italy was not one nation, but 2. Naples is not Italy, he said. They have always looked down on you. It was manipulation, it was genius, and it partially worked. The semi-final crowd in the Stadio San Paolo was not entirely behind the Azzurri. Maradona had weaponized history. Argentina won on penalties. Italy, at home, in front of their own people, were out. Italy's pain was compounded by another story playing out in the shadows of the tournament. Roberto Baggio, 23 years old, a player of transcendent, almost spiritual quality, already one of the most gifted footballers in the world. He had left Fiorentina weeks before the tournament, sold to Juventus in a transfer that tore Florence apart. The city rioted, cars burned, police were deployed. Supporters who had watched him grow from a boy to a phenomenon felt betrayed. And Baggio himself, conflicted and carrying that weight, arrived at Italia 90 as a man caught between who he was and where he belonged. His performances in the tournament were a kind of therapy. Sublime, aching, beautiful. He carried Italy when they needed carrying, and when they fell, he fell with them. That story of Baggio, of Florence, of belonging would echo loudly 4 years later in the United States. But in Italy, in 1990, it began here. And then, Paul Gascoigne, 23 years old, the most naturally gifted English midfielder of his generation, chaotic, brilliant, impossible to contain, on the pitch and off it. England arrived at Italia 90 as unfancied outsiders, not expected to reach the semi-finals. Nobody was writing songs about them, nobody was predicting glory. But game by game, Gazza dragged them forward, not with tactical discipline, with raw, unfettered talent, the kind that only appears once in a generation, the semi-final in Turin against West Germany, one of the defining nights in English football history. Gazza received a booking, his second of the tournament. He knew immediately, instinctively, what it meant. If England reached the final, he would not play in it. And the tears came, not carefully, not quietly. They came the way everything came with Gazza, completely, unstoppably, in front of the entire world. Bobby Robson, England's manager, told him, "You've got to stop crying, get on with it." And he did. Gazza played on, brilliantly. England lost on penalties. Gazza never played in a World Cup final. But those tears, those extraordinary, unguarded tears, did something no football match had done in years. They made the whole country feel something. Before a ball had been kicked at Italia 90, the BBC made a decision that seems obvious in retrospect, but was quietly revolutionary at the time. They chose an opera aria as their tournament theme, Nessun Dorma, Puccini's greatest aria, performed by Pavarotti. A piece of music so grand, so sweeping, so operatic in its emotional architecture that it seemed almost absurd as a backdrop to football. And yet, it worked. Completely. Utterly. It reframed the entire tournament, not as a sporting event, but as something epic, something cultural, something that belonged on the same stage as great art. Attendance at live classical performances increased in the months that followed. Pavarotti's album went platinum, and a generation of people who had never previously associated football with beauty found themselves watching, feeling, moved. Italia 90 didn't just change football fans, it created new ones. English football was watching all of this very carefully. Martin Edwards, David Dine, Irving Scholar. The men running English football's biggest clubs had been watching Italia 90 through a very different lens. What they saw was not just a beautiful tournament. They saw potential. Commercial potential on a scale English football had never been allowed to reach. They saw what the game could be if it was presented correctly, if the product was right. The Taylor Report, published just months before the tournament, had already mandated all-seater stadiums. The terraces were going, the cages were coming down. Football was being forced to reinvent its relationship with supporters. The timing was significant. By 1992, the First Division clubs had broken away. A new competition, the Premier League, was born. Within 2 years, Sky B had signed a television deal worth £304 million, £304 million, for football rights. The idea would have seemed like science fiction 5 years earlier. Italia 90 had shown what football could look like on television. Sky showed what it could be worth. And English football, scarred, battered, reformed, was about to become the wealthiest domestic league on the planet. But not every legacy of Italia 90 was golden. Turin, the semi-final, Pearce and Waddle. Stuart Pearce, nicknamed Psycho for a reason, ran up with the certainty of a man who had no doubt, saved. Chris Waddle, elegant, assured, blazed it over the bar. Not close, not nearly close. England were out. And something else had begun. A curse. A psychological wound that would define English football for decades. 1996, Wembley. Southgate, saved. 1998, Saint-Étienne, Batty, saved. 2004, Lisbon, Vassell, saved. 2006, Gelsenkirchen, Gerrard, Lampard, Carragher, out. For 28 years after Turin, England did not win a single competitive penalty shootout at a major tournament until Moscow. 2018, the World Cup. Gareth Southgate, the man who had missed in 1996, now the manager. England finally beat Colombia on penalties. The ghost of Turin partially laid to rest, partially. Because 3 years later at Wembley, in the final of Euro 2020, Italy won on penalties. Italy, the nation of Italia 90 itself, delivering the cruelest of reminders. The curse, not yet broken entirely, and now the wheel turns again, 2026. The World Cup returns not to one nation, but three. The United States, Canada, Mexico, 104 games, 48 teams, the biggest World Cup in history. Football has changed beyond recognition since that Italian summer. The money is incomprehensible, the players are global icons, the stadiums are cathedrals of glass and steel. But the feeling, that feeling of a tournament that transcends sport, that reaches into culture and history and emotion and refuses to let go, that feeling was born in Italy in 1990, in the heat and the drama and the tears. Football was in crisis, and then it wasn't. Because one tournament reminded the world and football itself of what the beautiful game could be. Italia 90, the tournament that changed everything. The next chapter begins in 2026. Drop a like on this video and subscribe to Ball and Badge, and we'll tell you every story worth telling. Thank you.